My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm Cloud Hired.
I'm Cloud Hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am Cloud Hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Michael Gibbs. I am here joined by Mark Milovanovic, and we're here today to help you build your tech career. Maybe you have a goal of becoming a cloud architect or a solutions architect or an enterprise architect or a security architect or a network architect or an AI architect. Well, that's our specialty here, architecture careers. But a little bit about us before we begin. Let me tell you about some great free things we have for you, and then we'll answer your questions. So I first wanted to tell you that before we begin, we have a completely free how to become a cloud architect job webinar tomorrow, in which case we will go over the entire career, what we do, and we'll be on Zoom, and you can ask us any questions you want about your career, and it's completely free, so join us there. We've also written a document on how to get your first cloud architect job, and it's completely free, so go download it. Love watching people get hired as architects. And more importantly, guess what? Next week, we've got a whole week and a half to 2 weeks of free Azure training. We're going to run a completely free boot camp for about 3 to 4 hours per day for about 2 weeks straight. It's going to be on the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. We'll spend the first 3 or 4 days covering the fundamentals of the Azure cloud, and then we'll go more into it where we'll cover the same topics, but in context more architecturally. And that way, if you're starting at ground zero, you'll be prepared and you'll get a lot out of it. If you've already passed the exam, you'll get a lot out of it because we're going to discuss these things more at an architectural and a business level. So it should be lots of fun, and it's completely free. So sign up, tell a friend. So we're here like we come several times per week, to at least once per week, to try to help you build your technology career. Because I know what it was like when I started. I started about 25 years ago. I had left internal medicine, which was a career, truthfully, that I loved. I was a nurse practitioner, but I loved tech more. And to me, tech was my infatuation. And I started my career, and I got to tell you, I got given so much bad advice. It cost me time, effort, and money. And when I finally found the coach that could give me the right guidance, I was a principal architect inside of 2 years. I spent 20 years helping people get hired and get promoted and reach their goals. So I love doing it because I don't want anybody to go through the struggles that I started. And I know what it's like starting out for all of you. And I also know what it's like if you're in a job for a couple of years and you're not getting promoted. Because I've trained and coached so many people, I typically know how to get you past those sticking points. So anything we can do to help you, we're here right now, and we are free. So that's a little bit about me. I've been an architect for about 2.5 decades. I've been a cloud architect, an enterprise architect, a network architect, a business architect. Most of my time was spent at Cisco. But otherwise, I worked for Comcast. I worked for another company, WorldCom, which was bought by Verizon. I've designed systems for banks. So all that big environment on the networking and enterprise side. I'm joined here by Mark Milovanovic, who's also a CCIA with about 10 years network architect experience. But I'll let him introduce himself to you.
Yeah, just like Mike, I started my career about 10 years ago. It felt like blind leading the blind. I think that would be a good way to put it. And you know what? I wish that there were good forums back then, YouTube sessions, LinkedIn, so forth, where you can ask people questions and you would get honest answers. But what I found really lacking is that a lot of people that give advice have actually never walked the walk. And this is what we're hoping to change, to give you guys access to two individuals that have over 30 years combined, actually probably, easily over 30 years now that I think about it, that have done different roles. I know myself, I've been in and out of engineering. I've done architectures, I've done solution engineering, technical engineering, solution architecture. I mean, you name it, we've been in and out of it together. And we're hoping that you can all take some time out of your day, think about the questions that you have that will help you either transition, if you're in an engineering role, into an architecture role, which is more of a designer role, or perhaps if you're looking to just break into tech, ask the questions now so that you don't make the mistakes others have made. And there's nothing wrong with that. Many people believe you have to pay your dues. I'm still trying to figure out to whom I'm supposed to pay my dues to because I haven't figured it out. So just remember, get the advice that propels you forward. We're all a little bit different. We're all a little bit different circumstances. But as a holistic nature, we're all going down the same path. How we get there might be a little bit different, but the advice and the experience that Mike and I would be able to give you and guide you is going to be worth its weight in gold. All right.
So Tyrone, bring in some questions and please feel free to ask them. We love helping people.
Well, here's your first question. I'm just kidding, Mike. Hey, Mike and team, happy belated birthday. I know Mike was in a giving spirit during his birthday.
I absolutely was. It was so nice to get away, spend a week or so with my wife. It was great.
All righty. So we got a question from 2N Hughes. Hey, Mike, how do I get hands-on experience if no one will hire me? I'm going to make the assumption here, Mike, probably what they're talking about is they're probably more in like an engineering role. That's what I'm gathering here. And they're probably having some trouble landing roles.
Well, I don't really want to guess. I'd rather ask. So 2N Hughes, are you trying to get an architect role? Are you trying to get an engineering role, like a cloud engineer or a network engineer or a security engineer? Are you trying to get a developer role? Because I really need that information to help you. But let's talk about how one would get hands-on experience. And when I know what you're actually looking to do, then I can talk about what would be the right kind of hands-on experience. Because if your goal is to be an airplane pilot, for example, and you get hands-on experience in medicine, well, it's not going to get you there. Okay, so 2N Hughes, you said you want to be an architect. So here's the thing. An architect is not a hands-on role, but you still need to be familiar with it. So first, let's talk about what is hands-on experience and why do people ask for it. So 2N Hughes, you can get hired without any experience. I can give you examples all day. But here's the thing. You have to be able to do the job. So I can think of, say, an Ivan Tamba, who was a college student who AWS hired after our training. At the same time with AWS, I can think of Jordan Kitko. I can think of Coyote. I can think of Balwinder, for example, who was a stay-at-home mom who got hired by Microsoft. I can think of Jermaine, who got hired as an enterprise architect after training us, coming from a landscaping business kind of environment. And I could give you many, many examples. So what is it that employers are looking for? They're looking for your ability to do the job and do it well. And most employers know that, and I don't mean this in a negative way towards certifications, that the certifications that are out there have almost nothing to do with the actual jobs that we actually do. There are a few exceptions, like the CCIE is a hardcore engineering exam, and you actually have to know something about networking to pass it. And there's a CCDE, which is actually an architecture exam from Cisco, and you need to know something to pass it. But for the majority of the multiple choice questions, they're typically not related to the work that we actually do in our jobs. So employers want to know you have more than what they're looking for, more than just that certification, that you may actually have the skill. So the reason I asked you what job did you want so I could get the right hands-on experience is that matters more. There's nothing that saddens me more when people come to us after doing 50 cloud projects, or they've been a cloud engineer for 5 and 10 years. And they say, I just went on an interview as an architect and they told me I need more hands-on experience. What else can I do? And the problem in that case is come back when you have experience or you need hands-on experience is really a proxy for an employer saying, I like you as a person, but you don't have the skill that I need to hire you right now. And that's the secret to remember. It doesn't mean you lack experience. From an employer perspective, we're actually trained by HR and others not to really give people any kind of negative feedback or the right feedback for fear of litigation purposes. So we have to use euphemisms. And the comeback when you have more experience is you're not ready to do the job yet. So now that we know the job you want, let's talk about getting experience. It is true that getting the right training and the right projects will make you marketable. You will have the skills. You will have the things to put on your resume. When an employer asks you questions on an interview, if you're good, regardless of your level of experience, you'll be able to answer them. And you'll be able to answer them in a way that's going to show that you can do the job, or you're 98% ready to do the job, but your attitude, your energy, your enthusiasm, your passion is so good, the employer would be crazy not to hire you and give you a little training. So there's that. So let's talk about architect things. What do architects do? And what do architects not do? The reason most people do cloud projects and can't get an architecture job is they learn things like how to set up a WordPress site, or they set up a static website on AWS S3. They create a table in DynamoDB. They set up a load balancer in front of two things. And while they're good things for a hands-on person like a cloud admin, these are not things that architects do. So what happens is the person gets experience in somebody else's job, and they learn somebody else's job, but they won't learn the actual architecture piece that way. So if you want on hands-on experience as an architect, what are you really doing? Well, here's what we do as architects. We ask our client the goals and vision for their business. We examine how their business operates, their current business processes, and the way they'd like to operate in the future, say their future business processes. When we understand how they want to operate in the future, then we can start looking at their data, the technology, their applications, their network and security, the technology platforms. And we have to see what they have. And will what they have actually support their future business goals based upon the way that organization wants to work, the way they want to manufacture their product, they want their customer journey to feel like. So in order to actually understand those needs, it could take us 3 to 6 months fact-finding to understand the business, and another 3 to 6 months learning the current technology before we can think about designing the future one. And it could actually be an architecture team of 15 to 50 people in a real big architecture, the kind I typically work on. So there's that. So now we've got to create a new team to lead the team to craft the architecture for the client. Then we have to document that architecture. We've got to go back to the stakeholders. We've got to present the document. We've got to present our presentations. We've got to get stakeholder feedback on it. Then we've got to go back to our team and tune the architecture. And now what else do we do as architects? Assuming we've got to a final architecture, then we've got to assess the organization and their readiness for change, their sophistication, their people. Can they actually handle this? What gaps in people and personnel do they actually need? Do they need to hire them? Can they outsource it? What have you? Then we need to create a statement of work and a technology adoption plan. And then we've got to go help sell that to the stakeholders. And as soon as it's time to build it, we're off on a new client. So you can see that role, the architect role, it's not a hands-on role. We don't touch the technology. We don't code. We don't configure. Now, they are very valuable skills to know this for other people's jobs, but not for ours. For us, it's about knowing how the technology works, Town Hughes, and how the technology works together. So what does that underlying IP net infrastructure look like that's going to support it? What do those routers look like? What do those links look like? What are those routing protocols? What is the IP addressing plan for the example of the underlying infrastructure? Now you've got your server infrastructure. What kind of servers do we need? What kind of CPU cores, DRAM, PCI lanes and bandwidth? What do we need? GPUs, etc. We're all thinking about that. That's the architecture piece of all this stuff that's there, not the hands-on configuration of any of it. What kind of load balancers? What kind of reverse proxies? How do we want to architect a demilitarized zone? So it's that. So Town Hughes, you actually do architecture things. So you could do kind of what I did, which is I went to an MBA program and kind of married that with architecture training and did that. But, you don't need to do that. What you need to do is projects I would look for a project where you could respond to an RFI, RFP, RFQ, a request for information, a request for proposal, a request for quote or pricing. I might go out there and create reference architectures for various industries. So maybe there's some new technology now that you feel could create a competitive advantage for a bank, an investment bank specifically, or a trading firm. And what kind of technology architecture could you do them to either speed up the frequency of their trades or reduce the latency or enable more throughput? Or how would you design a system, for example, that would algorithmically trade based upon news cycles and what's going on in the market? See, that's the architecture. It's that system design piece. And then I would go publish it. And I would create content that shows your business knowledge and your leadership and your technology. And I would go do that kind of thing every day. And I would create presentations and I would find a way to speak at conferences. And guess what? Now you have architect experience because that's actually what we do. Go lead a team of people up somewhere, even if it's not your architecture team, to show that you've got practice leadership. And then you're out there, you're showing, I've got the skills. I can do it. And then when people ask you about it, you're going to be able to explain it very, very well. And I can tell you, I want you to relate back any of your life experiences. So on my first job, I was hired as a senior network engineer at WorldCom. Within a couple months, I was their lead architect, but I was hired as an engineer. And when they interviewed me, one of the things they said is, Mike, there's network engineers 1 through 4. You're a 4, even though I never worked in tech before, which is a scary thing. So people are going to be coming to you when things are broken, and they're going to be upset, and it's going to be like putting out fires all day. How are you going to deal with the stress? Are you going to be able to be calm? And I said, well, let me tell you. In my youth, I worked as a paramedic, so I've got lots of experience being under stress. And then I worked in the emergency department. I said, plus I've trained martial arts for about 10 years now, so I'm pretty used to being calm in a stressful environment. Now, none of that had anything to do with working at MCI WorldCom as an architect. But showing him that, he instantly had a look of relaxation on his face. And it was like, okay, next thing to talk about. So that's how you get hands-on experience, but it has to be relevant for your job. Now, I do have an internship and a training program that we create for people called our Cloud Architect Career Development Program. And I'm very proud of what we've done. It's put my life's work into it. But no matter whether you're with us or whether you're somewhere else, you're not learning architecture by doing. You're learning engineering by doing. And I have no problem with people learning how to do. I have all my students build the cloud from scratch, so they actually know what a cloud is versus just how to configure some things. So I like getting hands-on, but the hands-on experience needs to be relevant to your job. I hope that helps too, Hughes.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to it, it depends on what type of experience you want to get. When we're talking about hands-on experience, you can get hands-on experience regardless if it's with a tech or if it's with these interpersonal skills that generally we associate with architecture. I would definitely say that a lot of people do require this tactile feel, almost, if you want to call it, of touching something, putting it together, and seeing the results. But what danger I see there is that many people focus on just the building aspect, and they really forget why they even started building. And that was to learn how a particular technology works. And then you generally go through stages. You generally start with 1 or 2 devices. You kind of want to simulate. That's really what you're doing. You're simulating the experience of trying to understand it. And then what you're trying to do is you're trying to understand the nuances of how a technology would react in certain circumstances. And the good news there is, since you're most likely going to be starting off from scratch, you don't even have to come up with scenarios on breaking these things, because you're going to break them anyway. And then you're going to have to figure out, why did they break? Why did they react in such a way? So that's where technical hands-on experience can become very pertinent. But you said specifically, why will nobody hire me? Well, the reason is because you are going for a position where the technical piece or the technical aspects of that career are not as valued as the interpersonal skills, the leadership skills, the design skills, the sales skills, the presentation skills. So what you need to eventually do is transition to where you focus on those skills in particular, and then perform the hands-on exercises that get you used to building that muscle memory as to what does a presentation entail? What are some good design practices when it comes to this presentation to garner the actual attention of somebody? So it is a key here to remember where you want to spend most of your time when it comes to hands-on experience. If you're an engineer, of course, it's going to be building, breaking, troubleshooting, and break and fix type of stuff. If you want to do architecture, you have to be very careful that you focus on the things that people want from architecture. Because if you start talking to a techie during an architecture interview, that might be a reason why no one wants to hire you, because they see you as an engineer. They see you as a technician. They don't see you as a businessman. So you have to transition from the operational thinking to the actual business acumen thinking, the business aspect of these things?
Yeah.
Great question, too, in here. From Freedom Lance, do exam questions have any real benefit to my educational growth after I'm hired? I kept on reviewing exam questions. I'm sorry, let me reread it. If I kept on reviewing exam questions, would that benefit me knowledge and experience-wise as a cloud architect or any... Okay, let's wait for the second part. Any tech career that has a specific certification attached to passing an exam, like the CCNA, the CCNP, or the CCIE? Are exam questions real-world situations that I will encounter? So let's focus on, Mike, if exam questions have any educational value for growth.
So Freedom Lens, there are some value in making sure that you understand certain things. So let me talk about the kind of exam questions that would be helpful to you versus the kind of exam questions that would not be helpful to you. If I were to ask you this question, what are the LSAs that exist in OSPF? What do those LSAs do? And if you were going to design a large OSPF infrastructure, how would you use your knowledge of areas and LSAs to optimize your OSPF domain to minimize work on the CPO? That would mean you'd have to understand the way the OSPF protocol works, the concept of the area, the 7 types of LSAs that we actually have, which ones get propagated in the area, which and where everybody has a map, which ones get sent across areas in more of a distance vector environment, where could I reduce and summarize my LSAs? And that would be kind of like a CCIE level question that you would ask on an exam. You'd make somebody do something related to that. There would be a huge benefit in you learning that. Now, if I take a different kind of exam question, and if the exam question was basically something fundamental, like, I don't know, like on an AWS exam, where they're asking different questions on the nuances of their services. This one has a limit of this one has a limit of this one has a limit of this, like a typical AWS Solutions Architect, Associate, or Professional exam. Well, no. And here's the reason why. They're trying to take something and they're looking for these little minute details that, here's the reason you don't want to remember them anyway, is they're going to change over time. The number of IOPS that's going to be available on Elastic Block Storage is going to change. Right now the maximum you can get is 250,000. That's not a lot for a lot of things. So I'm sure a year or two from now, the max you can get is, say, 1 million. So I'm less concerned about you memorizing those practice and answers for a multiple choice exam like that. So the key is to make sure you know the technology. What is the technology going to work with? What do you do? How is the underlying infrastructure? How is it used? How do you optimize your client's business performance if you're an architect? How can you optimize their cost? How do you optimize opportunities to leverage with the technology? Or if you're an architect, or if you're an engineer, how do you performance tune that kind of technology? What is it you can do? Where does the technology break? How hard can you push it? How do you make it scale? All those kind of things are hardcore engineering. And that's more learned by knowledge. So that's why I say it depends on the kind of questions that you're doing. And it depends how deep those questions are. If the question requires you to know 15 different things to answer the question, like if I had said to Mark, for example, Mark, your customer is trying to determine whether they should build a private cloud or a public cloud. Which of the following matters is necessary to create that information? And you had one answer that had, say, weighted average cost of capital. And inside of that, you had cash on hand, and you had things related to the cash flow statement and the balance sheet and the financial statement. And you had access to all that. And knowing that you needed all that, well, that would be the way that you would create an ROI to be able to calculate those things. So, I could ask a question like that, but first you need to know what's on a balance sheet. You need to know what's on an income statement. You need to know what's on a financial statement. You need to understand what an organization's weighted average cost of capital. So we can make multiple choice questions that are valuable, that force you to learn. But in most cases, the certifications are about, how do I turn you into a hands-on technician? How do I give you just what you need to do to be able to get an entry-level job at the lowest pay possible? Not really to turn you into a thinker. It's turning you into a commodity tech laborer, as if you will, as opposed to a tech leader who has good options. And there's certifications that are good. For example, that CCI I love it. I will also tell you the CISSP is a great security certification exam. You'll learn things along the way. So there's good certifications that are out there, but not all certifications are created equal. The ones generally created by the vendors are a lot weaker than the ones that are created by more of these, with the exception of Cisco, because Cisco doesn't really ask a lot of Cisco stuff on their CCIE. You could get a CCIE and go work for Juniper the next day or Arista Networks the next day because it's the same knowledge. Because they don't call it they're really more networking exams than Cisco exams.
Yeah, so addressing the last part of your question, are exam questions real world situations that I will encounter? The answer is 99.9% no. Because the questions on an exam predominantly, especially the ones that you have listed, those are going to be more the hands-on, right, where you got to learn how to implement the technology. They're going to test you on the details of that technology. They're not so much concerned about, do you really understand how technology A or B or C kind of fit together? That's really where you're going to look more towards a kind of like a design / architecture type of certification, perhaps one that teaches you a framework, perhaps another one that teaches you through use case scenarios like a CCDE, where you're going to take all the different technologies and come up with a proposal, a design proposal on how technologies are going to fit together. And there you'll have to understand how these things kind of fit together. But for CCNA, CCNP, and CCIE, they generally going to have to throw at you questions that are going to sound confusing, that are going to sound vague. Because if they gave you a direct question, most people would know the answer to it. But they're trying to actually test you on the specifics of the technology, right? So from that perspective, no. Now, will reviewing questions over and over have any benefit to you? Depends on how you review the questions.
Yes.
A lot of people, they get questions for a test, and they use these questions to measure themselves if they're ready to take the exam. I don't necessarily agree with that approach, because most people, when they go through an exam maybe 2 or 3 times, we have this innate ability to visually remember the things that we see on the exam. And even if we start shuffling through a program, let's say the answers, we learn to recognize 2, 3 words and muscle memory, and we start going through it. But when we stop and actually start thinking about the question that is there, and we start to dissect it, and we're really trying to understand the why behind the question. Why is something right? Why is something wrong? Could you make an argument as to why it is right, why it is wrong, compared to the answers to the answers that you have? If you were to take such an approach, then perhaps it could have a benefit to you. But if you're just doing it to kind of hit a mark of trying to remember certain details, you're most likely going to have more of a benefit, especially in that type of an operational role, to get your hands dirty. Meaning, go build the lab, build the scenarios, break them, see where you'll have to go and look to find the answer to the problem that you're searching for. That is going to yield a lot more benefit to you than simply trying to memorize the questions. Unless you do it the way we just mentioned, where you try to break it down and you try to build context and you try to build logic behind it, where you're really trying to ingest it, understand it. I don't necessarily want to use the term about meditate on it, but that's really part of it. You're trying to dissect the answer and let it really seek in. Do you understand what they're asking? Do you understand right, wrong? And then you go from there. If that's the case, then you will definitely have a benefit. But that is for the operationals. When you start going for different certifications, CCIE, it's an outlier. You'll have to do hands-on. The reading questions are not going to help you there. If you just read questions, you might as well just give them your $1,600 for free. But if you go for other things, CCDE, CISSP, those are going to be a lot more theory-based, and you do have to kind of know how things work. So that's where scenario kind of questions are going to come in. And you'll have to find some. Not easy to find, but you can find them out there. And I think that addresses it. Yep. All right, go ahead. Let's go to the next question, please. From Dingoman1. Hey, Mike, I'm taking your advice and finishing my business training. Now that I'm 6 months in at my current role, what would be a good roadmap to get to cloud security architect?
Well, given that you're working as a cloud security engineer, Dingelman, We need to get you those architect skills. So I need you to start delivering a lot more presentations. I need you to focus on your leadership. If you have an opportunity at work, and I know the company you work for because we trained you, and I got to tell you, that company will have the opportunity for you to present at conferences. So go out there and do that. See if you can get invited to executive briefings. Volunteer for really mission critical proof of concepts for, these 20 million to $1 billion deals. Try to stay in those things, nothing less than 20 million if you have the opportunity. Because when things are over 20 to 40 million, well, actually I should say 40 million because 20 million is an older day, but even still, that's when the executives at your company start paying attention to the deal and the people that worked on it. If it's smaller than that, you're kind of invisible. But when you start working on bigger projects, everybody cares about the bigger projects because they need the revenue for the business. So that's where you got to start to be seen by managers. Dress better. I got to tell you, when I went from engineer to architect, I got rid of my really comfortable shirts because this is me. I like this. I like my G-Shock, my shorts, my flip-flops, and I started putting on my Armani suits instead. And I will tell you, when you look different and you walk different and you talk different, well, that changes things. Now, when you're in meetings and you're on teams, Dingelman, volunteer to be a leader. Speak more, present more, show more. When there's a more challenging project that people don't know how to do, say, I've not done that, but, I'd love to be part of this or do the research on this or work with find the right people in the company that can help me design this or do this for you. That's going to get you out there. So it's all about your ability to design, your ability to present, and your ability to sell. So it wouldn't hurt to take some sales training either. I know I've taken a lot of it. And I swear, once you get to a certain level, in our early roles and even slightly mid-tier roles, like a senior engineer, it's kind of about our IQ at that point, how smart we are and how much we can learn. But once you go above that into, say, the architect role or a manager role or a senior manager role, director level role, VP, and you start getting into executive roles, it's less about your IQ at that point, although most people are pretty smart that are there. And it's more about what can you do? How do you bring out the best in others? You really can't make people work. I mean, you can tell an employee do this by Friday or you're fired. You can do that, but it's only going to be a few Fridays until that employee is no longer there and they're working for someone else. See, with these big projects, you're as good as the team you can build and what the output of that team is. So this is where you focus on your empathy and your emotional intelligence and your leadership and your communication skills, and you refine that. And that's really the secret to go into much bigger roles. And engineering, you can get away with it at the lower levels by being more focused on the tech. And I know you, Dingelman, that's not you. I know you can do much more and present. I know who you are. You're a great guy. But the point is kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Now you got to be seen as less as a techie and more the business person. And if it is you being really an expert on the tech, it's not why are you that. It's not about the tech itself. It's about what that tech can do for your clients. And that's why you're excited about it. So take that from this is really cool tech. Look how cool the tech is. It's going to stop this. It's going to do this. To, this tech can help this business for this reason. They'll take you very seriously, Dingelman.
Let's move on to the next question, Tyrone, please. From Drifting Tangerine, I have earned 5 AWS certifications, including Cloud Practitioner, Solution Architect Associates, SysOps Associate, DevOps Associate, and Developer Associates. I've also completed over 75 hands-on projects. While I regularly get interview opportunities, I am struggling to land a job. The interview usually starts off well, but then I get asked questions that seem unrelated to my certifications, such as about leading teams, business processes, sales, and presentations. Good question. Why are they focusing on these areas?
Okay, so Drifting Tangerine, I want to make sure I know what your job is. Are you looking for a cloud architect job or a solutions architect job? Are these the interviews you're going on? Because that's going to be really important. But you actually made a very common error, and it's a training error, and it's okay. We can get past this. We can get you to exactly to your goals. And there's still some things that you could actually understand and pull from this. So the first thing is that you've done these 5 certifications: the cloud practitioner, the developer associate, the DevOps associate, the SysOps associate, and the solutions architect associate. Now, I know there's some people recommending that. Unfortunately, this is a kind of a horrible combination, and I'll tell you why, but I'm going to tell you what we can do, so you're going to be fine anyway. The reason this is a horrible combination is each one of these is a different career. So each one of these certifications provides you about 5% of the knowledge you need for that career. So having 5% of the knowledge of a solutions architect and 5% of the knowledge of the SysOps or the maintenance person and 5% of the knowledge of a software developer and 5% of the knowledge of a DevOps professional isn't enough for any job. Now, if you had gone from the solutions architect associate, which is our recommendation, to the solutions architect professional, you could have skipped all these other certifications. Then you might have 15% of the skills that you need job, or 10%, versus right now we really need to start you from scratch. Now, there's the good news. Drifting Technologies, life is cumulative, and any little thing that you learned here along the way will help you relate to these other people because you'll be working with them, and at least you'll know what they do in their jobs. So I kind of hope that helps. Now, if you're going on architect interviews, here's what I need you to understand. It has absolutely nothing to do with anything that's related in these certifications. The AWS Solutions Architect and Associate are not architect certifications at all. They are entry-level administration certifications, which is, here's the name of this thing. So instead of calling it object storage, here's the branded name of S3. And here's how to set it up, for example. So guess what? That has nothing to do with the architect job. So I'm assuming they're asking you, like, how would you design your demilitarized zone, for example? Or how would you design an AI solution to create a recommendation engine for a global retailer? Or they're going to be asking you, you've got 200,000 remote access employees that attach to this enterprise. This enterprise has this asset, this asset, this asset. What would you recommend as a remote access solution, and why? Or the organization is trying to redesign their contact center. What types of things could you better do to create a better experience between the customer and the organization? So these are two. This is the kind of thing I would ask. You have 3 direct connections to AWS. How would you load share and not get out of order packets? That would be a more technical thing I would do. I might ask someone, for example, well, let's say you need the intelligence of an application load balancer, but the performance of a network load balancer. How would you architect this, and what would you do? And see, none of that's going to be in a certification, because all these certifications are the hands-on how to. So I don't want you to struggle with that. So here's the thing. First, we need to identify the job. Now, the job of the architect is this: ask the client about their business goals, their business pain points, their business challenge, where they want to be 6 months from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, for example. Understanding the business architecture, whether it be the org chart, or whether it be the way the products are manufactured, whether the way the customer is serviced, whether how the organization supply chain works and all the departments that get involved in the way, shipping and logistics, for example, if it's appropriate. How does the company sell their product? You've got to understand that. And that's what we do in this job. So when you go on an architect interview, they're going to ask you about this. And then we have to re-architect business processes with what organizations. So we're going to be asking questions related to that. You know, how do you redesign that? We're going to ask questions to determine your ability to assess the client's technology. What does their technology look like today? Can it meet the needs of the future? Where are the strengths of the technology, the weaknesses? What opportunities do we have? And, what are the threats to the organization, and how could technology give that organization a competitive advantage? We're going to ask you about managing stakeholders and giving presentations and leading architecture teams, because that's the job. That's what we do. So Drifting Tangerine, join us tomorrow on the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. We will go over 100% of the roles, and I will personally list pretty much about every skill you need. And if you have all these skills and you can do them and do them well, and you've got the communication skills, presence, leadership skills, business acumen, you should do great. We also have a completely free How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job, if that's the job you want. And I didn't see you respond back, so I hope that's there. But I would get that book too. Again, it's completely free. And well, it's not really architecture training. It's going to be more certification training when we do Azure next week. I will get much deeper into when we go into Azure and what the underlying technologies are than they ever would get on that solutions architect professional or a normal Azure solutions architect expert training, because we're biased towards architects in this organization. So we'll go much deeper into the underlying technology. And even that, I hope, will give you a good head start. But make sure you attend that webinar. Make sure you learn all those business things.
We had a fantastic conversation last week with Dr. Long and Dr. Johnson in regards to the importance of interpersonal skills. We call them these soft skills that are not really that soft. And I suggest you go on the YouTube channel, Go Cloud Architects, take a look at the interview that we did with them, see the answers and the questions that were asked. You'll get a really good understanding as to why it is so important. And we are seeing now the shift in interviews being more focused on what you mentioned seemed unrelated skill sets. But just to put it this way, if you see them to be unrelated, that means your mindset needs to shift. Because this is what's going to happen. And we're already seeing a little bit of the trend happen. I think AWS already also mentioned at Amazon that they wanted their solution architects, which are actually engineers, to actually focus less on the tech and start transitioning and focusing more on the skills that make us human. Because what's going to happen is we're going to have technologies that are going to enable us to be more efficient at the jobs. They're going to take some of the minutia that we generally have to deal with building out some of these technologies, and it's going to get relegated towards some type of robotics or AI, whichever you want to call it. But who's going to talk to the customers? How are you going to interact with your coworkers? And as a matter of fact, anytime you have to talk to people, you're going to be selling, presenting, making a case, persuade. So from that perspective, you can see that the tech itself is such a small aspect of an IT professional's job that it's almost like we got scammed into believing that it was larger than it really was. Because think of it this way, irregardless of if you did 100 hands-on labs, irregardless if you had 10 certifications, can you articulate your knowledge in a way that others can understand it? What good would all that knowledge be if it just stays up here? But that you can take it and be pragmatic about it, be practical in how to apply it. So that is why you see that what may seem so unrelated is probably the most important aspect of the interview. Because I guarantee you this, if you are capable of doing this, so there's 100 other people, what sets you apart? Regardless of what the job now is, right? Architect, engineer, but what sets you apart is how you communicate. Verbal, nonverbal, how you articulate and how you build up your arguments, how you make the other person feel. Because for some reason, people remember how we made them feel a lot more often than what we said. So that is why we see the importance shifting towards that. Now, in Mike's eyes and my eyes, the entire Go Cloud career team, we already knew that that was the most important aspect. And it's nice to see that the IT world is finally catching on to this a little bit. So focus on those aspects that make you that fantastic human being that you are. And that is this social skills, your interpersonal skills, to be able to connect with a person. Because in the end, no matter what it is, if you can't communicate with a person, you will never be able to get that job because they can't picture you with them. Nobody wants to work with a mute or with a root mute. So just keep that in mind. That's why you see the shift. And we're actually seeing also the cloud providers making this huge adjustment now that they want people to actually have some interpersonal skills to be able to work in teams, since it's not a silo job, believe it or not. That's also a mistake also with engineering. Engineers always has the idea, just leave me alone, I just want to build. And they don't remember that, hey, you're still going to be dealing with customers. You're still going to have to go on those troubleshooting calls. You're still going to have to work with vendors. Irregardless if you're less or more hands-on. Either way, it's going to happen. You might as well embrace it because that's what makes you human and that's what's going to set you apart.
Absolutely. And even for the engineers, I hate to say it, but AI can code, AI can write Terraform scripts, AI can write bash shell scripts. AI can automate a lot of what engineers do. But it's the engineers that understand it deeply and can communicate it deeply and work in a team that know how to performance optimize. These are the valuable engineering skills, not the how do I write a Python script, not the how do I write a Terraform script. As AI can do much more of that, it becomes less and less valuable. And all these other bigger skills, that's the secret.
Wholeheartedly agree. From, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Kisi or Kisai? If I'm not very good at reading, is it suitable for me to become a cloud architect?
Okay, Casey, I want to answer this honestly. If you're not suitable or good at reading, I really don't think any professional career would be good. Because for any career, we're going to have to learn. So I would say get good at reading. Now, Casey, I have a little bit of experience with this. When I grew up, the concept of reading was the worst thing ever. I was in, English classes in junior high school and high school, and they were all reading some kind of thing that had 18 million more words than it needed to. And I'd find a way to either figure out how to fake my way through the multiple choice exams or watch the movie and get through it, because I have still never in my entire life read a nonfiction book. But I learned that when I was younger, that reading is one of the most important skills in the world. So what did I read instead? When everybody else was reading their English, I was reading college level electronics textbooks in high school because I was infatuated with it. And when I got into college, I didn't know what I was going to be. So I pretty much almost got a psychology degree while I became a nurse the first time. And then I moved into internal medicine later. And what I did is I just learned how to read. Here's how you get good at reading. You do more of it. Here's how you get good. You do more, you do more, you do more. And Kesey, I come from a martial arts world where basically pain or discomfort is considered weakness leaving the body. So I'd find myself an excuse to read. And I would read at it until I didn't hate it, which is exactly what I did. Because to be an architect, you're going to have to learn about new things every day. And you can't get that from a YouTube video. You can't. You're going to have to be able to read. Now, Casey, I could tell you places where I could send you for a week to learn about cells. And then I could send you for another week to go learn about this and another week. And I could run up $100,000 bill in less than 3 months of education that you would need. But if you can read, you might be able to get $5,000 or $10,000 worth of training and be able to read the rest of it. And then that way you're going to get there at the most cost-effective manner. Now, there are certain things you can do along the way because, if you don't like to read, you don't like to read. You can read what you have to. You can listen to audiobooks. But the key is you really got to listen to all those words and listen to the audiobooks. And I'll tell you, I used to listen to 3 audiobooks a week while I was driving back and forth to my MBA program and still did it. So, here's the key. Some of these things that we're actually talking about, the only way to get there, the only way to learn them at a reasonable cost is to actually read. And I'm not talking about the more junior jobs. I'm really not. But when you're talking about roles that pay, $250,000 to $500,000 a year, and many architect jobs do, there's a level of sophistication you just need to have. There's a level of something, that knowledge, that substance that's going to separate you from the rest. So I do recommend you get good at reading and do what I did. Do it until it hurts a lot less. And that way you can get as much as you can, because I promise you, you want to get a book from Russ White on network architecture, you will learn a lot more than you will from that than watching 100 YouTube videos or even 1,000 YouTube videos. And you wanted to read the networking books from Jeff Doyle. Wow. Those books, which you can read, will save you hundreds, if not thousands of hours along your learning journey. And you can become very good very quickly. Because otherwise, if you can't read or don't like to read, and the reason it's going to cost so much is the people that are good enough to write these books that are published by a major publisher, typically speaking, can easily charge $5,000 for a week of training. And the only way to get their training is either to read their book, and they know most people won't read it, and then feed into their training programs. So I hope you can practice reading. I hope you can read more. It'll open a world of possibilities for you, whether it be as an architect, whether it be as an engineer, whether it be as a manager, a sales rep, anything. It'll help you in so many ways.
And Casey, just because you're not good at something does not mean you can get good at it. So what I mean with that, it's a skill you can learn, just like walking, like running, like exercising, speaking. Reading is the same way, but you have to practice it. You have to exercise it. Now, Mike already mentioned audiobooks. Well, I'm not a huge Microsoft Edge fan, so if you can find a different browser, I would definitely recommend it. But it has a built-in read out loud function. So what you can do is, as you go through the documentations for the technology, which is one aspect that you're going to have to get used to, the jargons and the language, and the way technical documents are put together is going to also be different than when you read, science fiction, if you read biographies, if you just read general news, right? So if you look at those documents, use the read out loud function and then read along and pay attention as to the pronunciation of the words. And then maybe what you can do is just start with a paragraph and then go back and read out loud. Try to enunciate, try to exaggerate the way your mouth moves. Now, the wonderful thing is it's going to look really, really ridiculous, but there's nobody there to see you. So you don't have to worry about it. And we've all kind of done that at some time or another where we've exaggerated our posture, our modulation, and so forth to practice. So that's something you can do. And you're definitely going to need it. Something else that I will recommend, this is something I did is when I was learning English. I started reading different books. And every single time I came across a word I didn't understand, I wrote it down. Now, here's the interesting part. We didn't have internet back then. Hopefully, I'm not aging myself too much, but we didn't have internet back then. Definitely didn't have AI, so I couldn't use that. So the only thing I had available to myself was a teacher that I would ask, either in school or secularly. I also had teachers. And I had this wonderful thing called a dictionary, like an actual physical dictionary. And what I would do is I would start flipping through the dictionary and learning about the word. And then once I learned about the word, there's usually like footnotes with it, right? That kind of get you to similar wording. So I looked at that. So I started trying to understand what this word is. Then I went back to the original paragraph or that sentence. And then I tried to understand within what I just learned about the word, does the context of the sentence now make sense? Now, this is going to take time, effort, energy. You're probably going to take 10 times as long as reading a document. But something wonderful is going to come of this. Number one, your focus is going to improve because you have to expel a lot more energy. Your comprehension is going to improve too because you're trying to make sense of the word and the sentence. So at the same time, this is called active learning, right? You're engaging in your learning. And you're going to see that over time, this mind has this wonderful ability, it starts creating pictures. And the more pictures you create, the more connections you create. The more connections you create, the more pictures you create. And when you do that, your comprehension goes sky high. So try doing that if you want to improve your reading comprehension and your reading in general. And by the way, for all those, even if you're good at reading, I would still recommend you do that when you don't know the words or if you're learning a new technology. But take it one at a time and then also add variety. Do biographies. See what type of language they use. As you're exposed to different vocabulary, guess what? Your vocabulary rises. Your understanding rises. Your articulation is going to rise as well. It's going to improve, which is going to help you eventually feel confident in speaking in front of groups. Write things down too, right? Write them down in your own words. Use your words. See if you can rewrite the sentence that you just read. And you'll notice over time, it's going to help you tremendously. But it's going to be a process. So just keep that in mind. So it's going to feel like you're trekking up the hill. It's going to be really, tedious. It's going to be difficult. But just like anything, as you exercise it more, that muscle, it's going to become easier. And you're going to find yourself excelling in a lot of different skill sets or avenues where otherwise you would not have. But don't give up. Definitely give it a shot. We've all been there.
Absolutely.
All right. Next question is from Leonard Goba. Hi, the business requirements for a cloud architect are great. Do recruiters, employers understand these are universal requirements? Are they reflected in the JDS?
Okay, Leonard. So a couple of things. First, the JDS, I'm assuming you mean a job description. I've never seen a job description in my life that actually meant anything. So I just throw them away in the trash. Now, there's the real job description, and then there's the cut and paste job description. So let me tell you what happens. I now want a job. I have to hire an architect on my team. And my managers or HR says, well, I need a job description from you. And I'm like, I'm not a job description writer. So I typically go to some website like Indeed or ZipRecruiter or Dice. I look for some job description for an architect. I cut and paste it all into Microsoft Word. I then use the find and replace to change their company name with my company name. I'm literally not joking. And I change the wording around, and then I add all the stuff that I have. And, I'm not in a plagiarism way. We're getting rid of the company specific stuff, but, the list of things that they like, pretty much that's what everybody does. So then what happens is you've got 10 people that all went to the same cut and paste job description. And they all added their stuff. And by the time you're done, you got a 15-page job description where you need to be a physician, an attorney, an airplane pilot, a programmer, an architect. In reality, there is no person that could do all these things. And if they could, they'd be bad at all of it. So there's that. So understand that, one of the best recruiters I've ever worked with is Christina Marino from ITXL in New York. I've also met with great recruiters, and I've interviewed a lot of people that came from, say, Korn Ferry International. These recruiters are good. And when they see a job description, they then go to the hiring manager and say, I know what's in that job description. Could you tell me what you actually want? And they write it down, and then they recruit for the right candidates, and then they will tell you what they're actually looking for. So there's that. Now, when it comes to recruiters, it's kind of like the story of the princess that needs to kiss a lot of frogs to find her prince, in that some recruiters are incredible, but a majority of them are absolutely terrible. And there's also the concept of a lot of fake jobs that are also there. So a lot of recruiters write these catch-all job descriptions, and they post them. And what they do is collect resumes. Now, they don't have any job for them, and that's why you can't figure out what it actually is in the first place. Then they stack 2 and 3 people's resumes, and then all of a sudden, when a company says, I've got somebody, and they're like, yeah, I got 50 people I can send you. Of course, they don't even know who these people are. That's not a good recruiter. So there's that. Now, hiring managers all know. Now, here's one of the scariest things, Leonard. 70% of all architectures, including cloud architectures, fail to provide any value, which means they actually hurt the business that bought the architecture. So yes, employers are very big on job descriptions. I've seen employers, and I've been on employee panels when we're interviewing architects, and the person walks out the door and they're like, great techie, but the person doesn't know business. We can't hire them. And quite frankly, I've seen, in most cases, the best engineers I've ever seen are usually ones that get rejected from these architect jobs, because specifically the hiring manager doesn't see their ability to do the business. The sales rep doesn't see their ability to bring in the sales. And the rest of the teams don't believe that architect can lead the teams of people that are necessary to get it done. It's kind of like herding cats in technology. Everybody's really smart, just like a cat is, but they all want to go in their own little direction. Cat A wants green M&Ms. Cat B can only come and wears the same shirt every day. Cat C needs heavy metal music. Cat D is a genius, but they can only work 2 hours of the day. And it's trying to get up, but they do more like 10 hours a day worth of everybody else's work. And it's about trying to get them all in the room, doing what you need to for the time. So yes, employers are big on this. When it comes to recruiters, the good recruiters, yep. But that princess has to kiss a lot of frogs in order to find that prince. And not all recruiters are good. Actually, Leonard, here's something I can think of recently. I spoke to 2 recruiters. It was for a network engineer that I knew that was a rock star. It was a network engineer that had a CCIE. It was a network engineer that I had an incredible amount of respect for. And I called 2 recruiters on his behalf. And they both wanted a cloud network architect that knew Azure. So I called the one person and they say, but he only knows AWS. I said, he's a CCIE. All clouds are the same. It's only the names. And I called the other recruiter, and that recruiter said, give me a CV. And even though he never worked on Azure, he was hired within the week, and they, gave him an incredible offer. So you can see one of the recruiters just didn't understand that AWS and Azure were the same. It was just the names that were different. And the other one, wow, I'm never going to find a CCIE that knows cloud architecture and cloud networking. Poof, let me put them in front of the customer, and they hired them. So not all recruiters are equally good at each other.
I'll simply say not really. To answer your question, they really don't know most of the time. So I'll keep it short like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, the recruiters can go either way.
I know that sounds harsh, but it's just the reality that most of them don't know. And hopefully over time we can educate them accordingly.
And that's why you got to find a good recruiter.
Definitely. Definitely.
And test them and interview them.
Oh, that could be, I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole. That could be a whole discussion for itself. We'll keep that for next time. Okay. So from Loser Inc., I recently gave an interview for GCP Practice Presale, but I was rejected because I did not know much about Kubernetes services, mesh, Istio, etc. So how much Kubernetes or cloud native knowledge should, and is there a second part for this, Tyrone? Or is just this one single part? I think this is it. So let's go with the assumption, how much should they know about these things?
Okay, so two things, Loser Inc. One is you mentioned something very specific. You gave an interview for the pre-sales practice, and then you're telling me they didn't hire you because you didn't know enough about Kubernetes. Most likely, it had nothing to do with your Kubernetes knowledge. It had everything to do with your ability to sell, your ability to present, your executive presence, because I've seen this. I've seen a tremendous number of people get architect jobs knowing almost nothing about Kubernetes. So there's a difference between knowing Kubernetes and knowing, and knowing cloud native. And let's talk about the difference between cloud native and not. So Kubernetes is a container orchestration platform. Everyone needs to understand how to design a Kubernetes cluster. And by designing that cluster, if you're going to be an architect, there's things like where you put your control plane, because you're probably not going to be using the cloud providers, things that are actually there. And so there's that. So, you know, how does the Kubernetes architecture work? What does the load balancer do? What does the API do? All those scaling things that you need to understand. And understand it well. Now, knowing how to architect cloud native and non-cloud architectures is absolutely critical. Critical. In fact, if you don't know how to do that, there's really no way to be there. Now, if you were in the pre-sales engineering practice, they would have asked you Terraform. And they would have done that because engineers are the ones that build the proof of concept labs. So again, that would be there. But I don't know the specifics of your background, and I don't know the specifics of your knowledge, but after interviewing thousands of people for pre-sales roles, I can tell you what typically happens. Somebody typically has something on their resume. So maybe I have somebody that has Kubernetes on their resume. And when I look at the resume and I see Kubernetes, I'm going to notice that some of the words aren't properly used together. And then when I see that and I look at the resume, I'm going to hammer that person with a basic Kubernetes question. And when they can't answer it, I'm going to go deeper. And when they can't answer it, I'm going to get deeper. And then the interview is going to fall apart. Now, why is that? Well, because, we got 3,000 applications for the role. We selected these people. We have a limited time to interview someone. And then we interview someone based upon something that's on their resume and they don't know it. And that instantly ends the interview. So keep that in the back of your mind. Was Kubernetes actually on your resume? Was Terraform actually on your resume? What level of presentation when you spoke with a person? When they read their body, what was their body language telling you on that interview? Were they leaning in when you spoke? Were they crossing their arms? Were they smiling? So I really don't know the specifics of your situation, but I've seen plenty of people get hired as cloud architects that really didn't know how to spell Kubernetes. Not many, thankfully, but actually I know quite a few that knew nothing of Kubernetes and still got hired. But, it's all different on the organization. But how to design a cloud native thing? Oh, yeah, you need to understand that. And at least understand that you're going to need a control plane. And if you're going to be in 3 clouds, you can't use like an AKS, EKS, or GKS. You're going to need something like an OpenShift and why you need that. You have to understand why you need an odd number of control plane nodes. You definitely have to understand the networking underneath it that's going to be there and where those load balancers are and what that API does. And how do you connect that to other parts, and where do you persist your storage? That kind of knowledge is there. So there's that. You know what we need to do one day soon? We're going to do another practice interview session. I'll invite you. I'll ask you some basic questions and see how you respond to them. So I'd actually like to know them. So, and because that's the only way we're going to actually get to it. But I will tell you, it's usually not why the person thinks that it's there. So I don't know how the rest of the questions answered, and I don't know how you answered them. But I can do a free interview practice session coming up in the next couple of weeks. In fact, Tyrone from Take It Down on my team, after we get done with the Google Bootcamp, let's do a free day of interviews. We'll do a couple of hour interviews and we'll invite people to Zoom or something like that. So make sure you cut that down, Tyrone. We'll tell Chris and we'll get it scheduled, because I think that would be because I really want to help you, but I can't help you without knowledge or information. But I think I can interview, and I'll be able to know whether you're ready right now. If you're not, and I can give you honest guidance, because I'm not the employer, and I'd be happy to do so. So let's get that scheduled.
Yeah, and I think we all can agree, if you're going to work in a domain such as cloud, there should be absolutely no question if you need to understand cloud native architectures. That's just how it's going to have to be. It's the same thing when you're working predominantly with private clouds, and then you transition into multi-cloud, which is basically going to be a combination of private, public, and then multiple public clouds. You're still going to have to understand cloud native data centers. So either way, this just really going to entail you understanding how are the different applications, how the different architectures interact with a solution that is scalable, that's agile, like a cloud infrastructure. So you're going to have to know that. And especially in what you mentioned with Kubernetes, as well as the different meshes. In this case, you mentioned I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. I'm sometimes bad at pronunciation, remembering 3 different languages. But when you look at the mesh that you described, the ISTO mesh, that's going to be an architecture with control and data planes. So you're going to have to understand how Kubernetes and the orchestration fits into that anyway, especially at the high level of the architecture, if you're going to be in a pre-sales role. If you were in a, let's say engineering role, then I would expect you to understand, how does traffic management work? How does the encryption and decryption of these processes work? What type of platform support do I need? So again, if you're going to work in a domain that is going to be specific, understand the specifics, the native way things work on that platform. It's no different than what we've been doing for 30 plus years anyway, when it comes to networking, to system admin. Same thing. If we work on a platform, we got to understand how the applications, how the protocol, how the different technologies function, deploy, and are designed on that particular platform. So especially in a pre-sales role, at a high level, you should understand the difference between the control and data plane, especially when it comes to Kubernetes and the orchestration itself. All right, let's go on to the next question from Valentin Stephen, I hope. Hi, Mike. I have a cloud engineering interview soon. It is actually my first. What should I expect? And what would you advise me to review before then? Thank you.
Okay, Valentine, I'm going to actually cover this on 2 sides, because what you can actually learn in a week or a month is not as important as some of the other things. And then I'm going to get into the tech, but I first want to get this communicated to you. When it comes to hiring, 50% of what we care about is your technical ability. And if it's your first job, you're not going to be the best technically. So we got to focus on the other stuff. The other 50% of your interview is the following. One is, can you do the main components of the job? So we're going to talk about that in a minute. The next thing is, can you communicate your knowledge? So what this means, they're going to ask you a question about a technology, and how you answer it will be the determination. So here's the difference, Valentine. After conducting, say, 5,000-6,000 interviews, if I ask someone compare block storage and object storage, and they say, EBS is block storage, you mount it to a virtual machine. S3 is object storage, you store backup stuff there. If they tell me that, do you know what's going to happen? I'm going to reject them on the interview. Now, if they can tell me, Valentine, that block storage and object storage are 2 different types of storage area networks, meaning they're accessed over a network. In the old days, we used to use things like fiber channel, but now we use the IP network. Now, let's talk about the difference. When we have object storage, we have data which is broken down into an object. And what's very unique is that object itself actually has data about that object called metadata. And this metadata enables us to truly do things with the data, such as look for the data, integrate it with a big data environment, and find information. Now, object storage is write once, read many times, because anytime anything is modified slightly, it would create a new version. And therefore, we couldn't mount it to a server. For example, if we had a server with 2 terabytes of DRAM, it would have a 3 terabyte swap file. And if that swap file was on object storage, it would create 3 terabyte objects potentially 1,000 times per second as that swap file would change, and we would fill up our RAID arrays. But object storage is really great for backup and archival purposes, great way to create images of our virtual machines, same way to distribute software, distribute content. Now, by comparison, block storage is a type of storage area network, meaning it's accessed over the network, so its limitations are going to be the network speed, amongst other things. Now, with block storage, it takes the data and breaks it down into blocks, and it can store it really anywhere on that IP network, which is what enables effectively the separation between the virtual machines and the storage area network. By doing so, it enables the cloud providers to basically have near and limitless scalability by just adding additional hard drives into their RAID arrays that serve their block storage environment. Now, because the data is stored in blocks in a similar way to the way data is typically written to a hard drive, now we can see. That's why we can use block storage as a virtual hard drive, because it's going to look and feel like a local hard drive, even if it's accessed over an IP network. See, Valentine, if you answer it that way, you show that you understand storage. So, be able to explain technology. What is that technology? How does the technology work? And why do you use it? Because typically speaking, in an interview, we can't ask you to build anything. We have to ask you technology. And most people fail the interview from the competency perspective because they can't explain the technology that easy. So the ability to do the job and your ability to communicate is going to be critical. But here's the secret weapons. Your attitude, your energy, and enthusiasm are so important. Many people are just not that motivated. And when you can show that employer that you are there to solve their problems and you're excited to work and you're excited to learn, that sets you apart. And I've hired people many times, as of many managers that I know, people that have lower skills that are really good at showing that they're there. Now, the next thing that we really care about is really, one of these things is really great. So we also care about, can we trust you? So don't have anything on your resume that you can't answer about, because that's going to show lack of trust. And if we ask you a question that you don't know, tell them, I'm sorry, I've not had the opportunity to learn that yet, but I'm highly energetic. I'm highly enthusiastic. I love technology. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and I can find the answers to things quickly. And if I was on your team, I would do whatever it takes to learn this and go above and beyond, blah, blah, blah. If you want to check my company, talk about X, Y, and Z, where they're your best things. And actually, Valentine, we've got a free book on winning the interview. Go download it. It's completely free. My team will pop it in the chat box for you. Now, the next thing that we really care about is, do you know what you know and know what you don't know? So make it clear that you're motivated, you learn quickly, but you know your limitations so you don't make big mistakes. The next thing we care about is, are you a great team player? And after that, I also really care about, are you willing to go above and beyond? So you communicate that, you're there. Now, from a tech perspective, what should you know? You should have a good knowledge of storage. You should have a good knowledge of compute and the compute platforms that are actually there. After we have that, you should understand load balancers in depth, the network load balancer, the application load balancer, the reverse proxy. You should understand block storage, object storage, file storage, I think I mentioned. You should understand DNS. You should understand firewalls, packet filters like access control lists, those kind of things, at bare minimum. Now, if you're going to be a cloud engineer, you're going to need to have good Linux knowledge. And not like the CompTIA Linux Plus, more like the Red Hat certified engineer. That's the kind of depth I need you to know in Linux. So make sure you're used to systems and installing applications on systems and patching kernels and compiling code if you're going to be a cloud engineer. These are not architect skills, but they're engineering skills. I also know that you're going to need to know Python to do well in a cloud engineering interview. You're typically going to have to be fairly adept at Bash shell scripting and be able to communicate how you would write it, as well as a Windows PowerShell script. Or at least, what would you do? How could you automate it? And you typically also need to be able to understand infrastructure as code fairly well. If you can master those basic essentials, and you can communicate well, you should do really well, Valentine. But there's a free document on how to pass an interview and how to research for the interview. So I'd love you to download it. It's completely free.
All right, let's go on to the next question, please, Tyrone. From Freedom Lands, will an 8-suit wardrobe be enough for a cloud or enterprise architect? I'm trying to make an executive presence statement and not a fashion statement. How should I dress as a cloud or enterprise architect?
Okay, so let's be practical about this. And I'll show you the good and the bad, but you won't need 8 suits to be fair. You know, if it's your first job, you're going to need one very good suit for your interview. And I'll give you some secrets on this too. So you're going to need a good one. Now, me personally, I reached a point in my career, and I'm going to be brutally honest about this. I was working as an architect. I was wearing these, what I thought were nice enough Hugo Boss suits. I give a presentation, and my manager would say, Mike, you lack the executive presence. You lack this. And I'm like, all right, but don't worry. We don't need to spend that much. So, you know, I lost my luggage one day. It was the craziest thing. My wife was with me. I was bringing her to San Francisco for San Jose for the week. We landed at the San Francisco office, went straight to the Nordstrom, found some Canali suit that fit off the rack, like almost perfect. Bought some overpriced shirt, bought some overpriced belt and some overpriced shoes. Gave a presentation. My manager said, wow, you were good today. You do that one more time, we can get you a promotion. Gave a speech the next day. My luggage arrived. It wasn't there. Went and gave another speech, and it was like, okay, well, it was good. And it was so good, I got that promotion, and it was a big promotion. So here's what I did. I figured that charcoal gray, black, and blue pretty much work for every occasion, right? So I got those 3. And then I got 1 or 2 sport coats, and that pretty much covered me. And that way, you know, you could change your pants, you could change your sport coat, and you were pretty much good enough. So you're not going to need that many. So the first something that I would say is that if you don't have a big budget, it's less about it's more about the way it fits you and how the fabric lays. So go shop around. I can tell you what I did. I bought that one obscenely priced suit in San Francisco. It was a little ridiculous, but I had a big presentation and I couldn't lose my job, so I had to do what I needed to. And then when I realized that made a big enough difference, I had a friend who worked at Bloomingdale's. His name was Watkins at the time, and he would call me every time they were on sale. And I went into the store and I said, I need you to tell me when I can buy 3 of these, and I need a good price on it when it's on sale. And he said, hold on, let me go talk to the manager. And they're like, all right, you've been here before. We'll give you a deal on it. So you can also negotiate on the price. But no, you don't need 8 suits. I'd say 3 suits is probably what you need. A black, a blue, a gray. Because at that point, you know, they kind of go all the time. But whatever you get, make sure it's fitted to you and custom to you. And some people can just go grab something straight off the rack and it's going to work. Not me. I've got a 50-inch chest and a small waist. So I've got to get things, and they've all got to be custom made, and it's there. But it wasn't that way when I was in my youth. So the key is just do what you can and you'll be great. So I think you'll be in good shape. But no, don't spend a fortune. You may, for the first architect job, get something extra good. I mean, because you just for that interview is to get through your interviews, you're good. But then after that, get 2 good enough ones, get your mileage out of them, and then find a time that you can actually get a couple. And by not going as a fashion statement, by going with a blue or a charcoal gray or a black, well, I got to tell you, they kind of work anywhere. And, you know, I had to get newer ones because, you know, I did a little less yoga for a period of time. And I got to tell you, the ones that I bought now and the ones that I bought 10 years from now, honestly, I can't even tell the difference between them other than the size. So, and also you can probably save a little bit with Canali. I found that Canali typically fits very well, and it's typically a little cheaper than Armani or Zegna or the other things. And I've never had anybody complain about it. So that's typically what I do. But that's for more of the enterprise architect. For the cloud architect, you can get away with a lower version of that suit. But once you start getting into that enterprise architect and better, and these bigger roles that pay more than $250, to some degree, you know, they're looking at everything, which fork you use, which wine you choose. It's kind of silly, really. I had to get rid of my what do you call it? I had to get rid of my G-Shock watch and replace it with a Tag Heuer to be appropriate at one point in my career. But if you see me, it's going to be with my G-Shock watch. That's truly who I am. And you don't need to go crazy.
All right, Mike. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I was tasked to keep you on time today. So we're going to have to be wrapping up here. That's
Okay.
going to be the last question, but I do invite everybody
I-
if you do have
Let me do a
additional
couple. Let me
questions.
do. I think some of these questions are pretty easy for me to answer. So let
Okay, which
me
one you wanna do quickly?
at least get. So I can answer the EarnJoy Active Directory. And so what is Active Directory? Active Directory is the Microsoft version of the Identity and Access Management Platform, which determines who you are, what you're allowed to do, and then keeping track of it. So that's the Microsoft thing. If you're a cloud engineer, you're going to work with Active Directory every single day. If you're an architect, you're going to have to understand that it's one of the main identity and access management systems for a business. And as architects, we don't touch the technology. So I would kind of keep that in the back of your mind. It's not going to be useful for you to configure it, but it's going to be very important to you for you to understand how it works and the way you would use it. And Arif, I would never create a website as a personal portfolio for me. That's not the kind of thing that I would ever do. And I've never recommended it. And typically when I see that, it kind of scares me. Because if they have something good on their resume, I'm going to read that resume. But if they're pointing me to some website, unless it looks like they spent a lot of time, effort, and money in getting a beautiful website, it typically sticks out like a sore thumb and it doesn't match the polish that I need. So optimize your resume, optimize your skills, optimize your communication, optimize your messaging, optimize your brand, and the world will come to you and you don't need to worry about these kinds of things. So I thought we could sneak those two in there for today.
Yeah, that's perfect. But I'm not going to take a no for an answer. We have to wrap up this time because it is very important what you got scheduled. So
absolutely, you are correct. So I must go. But tomorrow, join us in the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. Love to see you. We'll go over the architect role. Got questions about an AI architect or enterprise architect? Come, bring them. We'll have fun with it. We're very familiar with these architect roles. We've done all of them for decades. So come join us tomorrow and we'll have some fun. Download the free guide on how to become a cloud architect. Again, it's completely free. And next week, join us for an Azure Solutions Architect Bootcamp. It'll be fun. It's all free for the next couple of weeks. So